All right, folks. Welcome, everybody, once again to Irish Sports Daily Power Hour. I'm your host, Mike Frank, here with Jamie Uyeyama, who's looking pretty sharp there, wearing some of his favorite gear there. So I'm excited about that. And then we have Greg Flamong, who is going to be producing the show. We'll get a few of his thoughts as well throughout the show. Before we get going, wanted to mention once again, a great time to sign up for Irish Sports Daily. You can go to the front page, click on the premium section, and sign up today. Lots going on with recruiting. Notre Dame's got some recent commitments, so we're going to talk about those, and we're also going to just talk recruiting. Pretty heavy recruiting-oriented show today. We're going to get Yama's opinion on a lot of the guys that are left. We'll start with the offensive side. So that's what we'll be doing today. Before we get going, I wanted to mention our first sponsor, which is ESQ Clothing. ESQ has been making the best handmade custom suits, sport coats, tuxedos, and shirts for the last decade, and has been featured on GQ, ESPN, USA Today, and you've seen them dressing your favorite players and coaches. ESQ only gets the best fabric from Italy and England's top mills. With over 40,000 fabrics to choose from, you're guaranteed to look your best. Go visit esqclothing.com and book your appointment. Mention ISD, get 10% off your entire purchase. Once again, that's that's esqclothing.com. Also, just wanted to point out as well, you can check us out and follow us on YouTube. Watch the show live. We have a number of viewers that come watch the show live and participate in chat. You can find us by searching for Irish Sports Daily. We have a channel there. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel, and you'll know all about our future stuff that we have going on as far as videos go. So Greg and Jamie do a great job with Hit and Hustle, kind of breaking down the nuances of football and a lot of different topics, and going from there. All right, Yama, let's get going today. There's certainly a lot of good news that's happened with Notre Dame recently. The latest news is Javian Osborne committing to Notre Dame. Big-time running back that I know I'm a huge fan of. He's from Forney, Texas, and not the tallest guy. He's 5'9", 190 pounds, but I love this guy. I think he's a kind of a JD Price. That's what you're looking for. Very fast runner. A guy who I would say at the same time, JD didn't quite show the same amount of, inside running, the ability to make people miss. At the same time, as his senior year, he really showed that. Osborne showing that a little bit more early. And so I think that's a very good sign. I really like this prospect, Jamie. Notre Dame is going to be losing probably a lot of speed in Jeremiah Love and JD Price next year. Most people anticipate they'll head to the NFL draft. A lot of running backs do because they don't want to put the mileage on their body. So probably losing those two, and they need to replace it with some speed, and Javian Osborne definitely has some speed. So love this pickup. This is exactly what Notre Dame needs if they're going to continue to make these big plays. And I'll point back to that Indiana game. Notre Dame needed a big play to get going, and all of a sudden you get a guy like Jeremiah Love taking it, a huge distance there, and really it's a game-changing play and a back-breaking play for Indiana, and a soul-crushing play. And that's what those big home run backs can bring to you. And we saw Ohio State do that a couple times to Notre Dame, unfortunately, with some of their backs and their big runs. And so it's important to have these kind of guys, and it's exciting to have Javian Osborne also in the class. Your thoughts with Osborne?
Yeah, I mean, explosive plays are like gold. They're so valuable. And I think the main thing that you brought up is his ability to, like, that's an inside run. That's like a 4-yard gain that he turns into a touchdown, right? Like, he makes the guy miss in the hole. His feet are exceptional. He's got great lateral quickness.
Yes.
That I think is the big differentiator with him, right? And that's why you look at a guy like that who's 5'9", 190 pounds, and sometimes you think if a guy's 5'9", 190 or small, like a smaller guy, you think, oh, maybe he's a third down back. Maybe he's not going to be an every down back. But the way you see this guy runs, first of all, he's tough too. He runs tough as well. But you see him create stuff like that on the inside runs with the jump cut, turn small gains into big gains, And that's when you see a guy who could be a number one back, right? And that's really kind of what you're looking for. And that's what you're looking for, what they get out of Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, right? Two guys who were like number one back, capable of doing that and like carrying that load, but also being, creating big plays, right? Making guys miss yards after contact, things like that. And I think that's so valuable, and that's why he's really like one of the best backs in the country.
I love him, and as you mentioned, the jump cut is such an important part. If you're going to be an inside runner, you're going to have to be able to do that and have the quickness. When you're playing in Ohio State, you got to have quickness. You got to have the ability to turn left and right and make people miss and then explode out of those cuts. And that's what this guy does. He's a very good inside runner. And again, 5'9", 190 is not the biggest size, but it seems to be working out for Jahmyr Gibbs, so
yeah.
And there are a lot of backs that have this kind of size that have been very, very successful throughout college and professional football. So I like this guy. I think he's a really talented player. And I would say, Jeremiah Love was not necessarily the best kind of jump cut in the hole type of player. And I'd say this guy's, more advanced than both those guys coming out of high school in that regard. Now, Jeremiah Love had the size, and the power that I don't think that this guy has at this point. I'm sure he's going to get bigger and stronger. And Price is, I think, a very good comparison, but I do think he's more advanced in that regard than JD Price was. So excited about him. I think he's, a very, very, very important piece to this. So what I wanted to do is just kind of look at the board and what we have left. And there's a lot of guys, and we get asked this question a lot of times, Jamie, about who we like next. And I think both of us have said that we like Brian Bonner maybe just a shade more than DeZephon Walker and Jonas Walton, but it's a very small shade for me. And the only reason why is when you look at Kedron Young, Aeneas Williams, they're good inside runners. They're power backs. They can move people. And Nolan James is kind of more of a good inside runner. None of those guys, I would say, have quite the speed of a Javian Osborne or a Bonner. So to me, I think it's important to get another speed back. But then you watch Jonas Walton, very much, can run. He's got the ability to stretch the field. Is he as fast as Bonner? I wouldn't say so. I know their 40 or their 100-meter times are pretty similar, but I think Bonner has just kind of that little bit extra gear that can kind of pull away that Walton can't. I think Walker has that kind of long speed that Bonner has, but I think Bonner plays a little bit better at competition, and so that's to me why. And it's very slight for me, very slight between. I'll be thrilled with any of the other three. I really would. I think all three of them are very good backs and bring something that what they don't have on the roster. All three of those guys would bring something they don't have on the roster, which is important. So your thoughts here, now that, they have Javian Osborne in fold, what would you prefer? And then what do you like about each one of those backs? And let's start with who you like the most, and then let's start with what you like about each back.
Yeah, Bonner would be my first choice. So I would agree with that. I just think that to me, it's not even that the long speed. It's more of like he's got that just that extra acceleration. And I think that's one of the things too when you're looking at when I'm comparing Osborne and JD Price. I think that's one thing that I saw a little bit more with JD Price. I saw more with Osborne as a sophomore than I think with and when I saw later with JD Price. And what you see from JD Price now is that he can go to 0 to 60 quick, super quick. And that's what you see with Bonner. Like, obviously the guy can just accelerate and hit another gear. And I would say obviously Walton's bigger, like a bit, I mean, not taller, but like thicker. Right. So I think that's, one of the difference. He's built like more like a guy who's going to look like almost close to Kedron Young, maybe not that big, but like he's going to be pretty thick. And Bonner is more of like this natural home run hitter, Jeremiah Love style, right? Like, so I think that's why I kind of look at him as more of a compliment to Osborne, who you said, like, more of an inside runner. And Walton, I think, is a little bit closer to Osborne in a lot of ways. But I really, really like him. And obviously, like, mentioned that he ran, the Greg posted that he ran a 10.72 last weekend. His personal best is 10.63. It's pretty darn fast. Obviously, Bonner's a guy who's run under 10.7. They're both guys who can be home run hitters, right? And I think there's a violence to Walton's game that I really, really, really like too. That I think is really good, and that's why I would probably have him. To me, it's so close. Like, you would take either one of those guys and be thrilled to have them. But I think, just in terms of just like, I think there's just that little bit of, like you said, like that little bit of extra gear with Bonner, and that's why I would probably lean in that direction. And with Walker is a good back. I like him. I think he shows the speed to pull away. He's got good feet. He's a good one cut zone runner. Does a great job of really kind of like pressing the line and go. I think he's really probably a little bit more polished as a runner, I think, when I watch him. But I don't know if he's just has that same kind of level of like home run hitting, like natural speed that those other two have, specifically Bonner, for sure. So that's why I would put him below those guys. But I mean, if you had him as the second back in the class to Osborne, I think you'd be thrilled with all three of those guys. Like, they're all really, really good. And probably I would say that if you look at like where Notre Dame's landed some pretty good duos in the backfield in recent recruiting classes, I would say maybe whoever they kind of end up here, you could argue that this would be the best pair that they've landed in running back if they land any of those three guys to go along with Osborne.
I agree with you. I think that's very, very true. And here's the difference when I see Bonner and Walton. And to me, I know a lot of people talk about 40 times and things like that. 10-yard dash time, I think, is everything for a running back, because that shows how explosive you truly are. And that's where I think Bonner has the edge on the others, is his first, probably 10 yards. He can just, as soon as he sees daylight, he can shoot through that hole and get through it quicker than the other two can. And so then again, that's kind of what I like about Bonner a little bit more than the others. With Walton, you mentioned the power. And that's very important. It's very, very important. And we don't see with Bonner the kind of the power back, the ability to break tackles and things like that. We don't see that as much as we do in the Walton film. And so that, it's kind of pick your, what do you need here? And so I, like you said, I would be thrilled with any of those guys. I think they're all very, very talented players. And, I think when you look at this, that's pretty fast with Walker there. I mean, he can get down the field too. So he definitely can. So good job by Greg, kind of getting up the video and showing the best of what a lot of these guys can do. Is there, out of any of these three, do you think, and this is kind of the thing that you just don't know, because a lot of people say, well, who's ready to play early? And really, it's the nuances of the position that keep you from not playing. It's not, does this guy have, ideal size or things like that? It's more, can you be dependable in blitz pickup? Do you know your assignments? Do you have your steps together? Do you have all these types of things? Because just even the one little wrong step can cause a fumble. I mean, it just does. These little things are so very important that a lot of people say, well, this guy's ready to play early. Well, we don't know that until you see what they can do in just the nuances of things. And it's for freshman backs, I think, obviously, if you have playmaking ability like an Osborne or somebody like that, you're probably going to have a better chance to get on the field, but you're only going to have that chance as long as you can do the other things. Protect the football. Don't fumble. I don't care how talented you are. You fumble the football, you're not playing. That's just the way it is. And and blitz pickup and just having the right steps and the right feet and doing the right things that you're supposed to do. Can you catch the ball out of the backfield? How dependable are you on what is your stamina? All those types of things. So we'll see, but I like all those guys. I think they're all very, very talented. Let's move to wide receiver, and I know Matt put together a sheet today of kind of like the heat on these guys, and he pretty much had Caden Finley from Aledo, Texas, as a hot guy, and of course Braden Robinson. That if you land those those two, that would be two really good players, certainly, and we'll talk about them. But still having guys like Brody Keefe and Brian Williams on the roster here. Jamie, here's the thing that I don't understand, and I don't know why. It seemed, and again, I don't think that this is a very deep, very good wide receiver class. I think you'd probably agree with me there. It's, there's some good players, but I wouldn't say that there's a lot of elite 5-star guys where you're just wowed by them. But Notre Dame can seem to find all these defensive linemen and running backs to offer. I have to admit, I'm a little bit confused why they can't find more kind of big wide receivers to offer or other guys. I mean, I'm sure that that's what Mike Brown's going to be doing in May, is going to try and find some other options. But look, I love Caden Finley. I love Robinson. I think those guys are outstanding receivers. Take them. Very, very excited about both if Notre Dame lands them. But it's kind of that boundary thing. And when you look at, once Fields is gone, you have Micah Gilbert at 6'2", and you have Jerome Bettis
Cam
Jr.
Williams.
at 6'1". And Cam Williams, and that's all your height there. And Cam Williams is probably 6'1", maybe 6'2", but there's just not a lot of height and size there. And so I'm surprised we don't have more names there for the big body guys. But let's start here with kind of your thoughts. What do you like about Caden Finley? And a lot of people are going to compare him to a lot of people, but I've seen Greathouse being mentioned as a guy that people compare him to. I think he's faster than that. I really do. What are your thoughts here on Caden Finley?
Yeah, I mean, Greathouse is the guy that I think, he reminds me of, just in terms of his overall, like, you could see the polish in his game, and just like you can see just a lot of like understanding of leverage. Obviously, you see he's got some like yak ability that's impressive here too. And I do think he could play the boundary, but yeah, he's not he's not Miles Boykin, he's not Chase Claypool. He's not that size, right? So I think there's that, but certainly like too, as a blocker and stuff too, like he's a guy who gets after it as a blocker. Oh, yeah. I think that's always like an encouraging thing. But he's got some juice, and I would say, yeah, that is one of the things that I bet, like, if you were going to compare 40s, especially as high school juniors, you'd say, yeah, Finley's like faster than Greathouse. But I think
more
just
explosive.
An overall, yes. Yeah. And I'd say like but an overall game, I think they are similar in a lot of ways, right? And to me, he's one of these guys too who's kind of similar to Greathouse, where you say, this is a guy who should be able to compete early. Like, he should be able to compete early. Just great body control there. Obviously, he's got great hands. Just one of these guys that I think to have one of these guys in each class, I think, is important, because you kind of know where like the floor is going to be, right? The floor is going to be really high for a guy like this. And that's why I think he is probably, if I was going to look at all the receivers, to me, he's the most important guy, because there's so much, there's so many, like, so much variance between like a guy who runs, like, a guy might run a 10-400 meters, but he's got a lot of work to do to learn how to be a receiver. And I don't think there's going to be a lot of, Finley is obviously, going to get better and learn and stuff, just like we've seen with Greathouse, but he's also going to come in at a certain level. And that's going to help a lot. That's going to help a lot too. So, to me, I think I look at a guy too, when, we were talking about with Greg and I talking about this a few weeks ago, we're talking about like what you see as like a wide receiver one. Like, I'm talking about a guy, like, it's third down, It's 3rd down and 7. You want to get a first down. You know it's man coverage. This guy can win. And he can win because he understands where, maybe if it's zone, he understands, where to sit in a zone. If it's man, he understands the leverage to win, to be able to like body a guy out or whatever, right? Like, and I think that's why he's a super valuable guy. Plus, he's a good athlete too. It's not just like he's obviously just not just a smart thing. And obviously, people who know his dad, Jermichael Finley, was a really good tight end in the NFL for years. But I think you put all that kind of stuff together, and that's why he's like a big time prospect.
I tell you what, he reminds me of, and you may think I'm crazy for this, but he reminds me of like the number 2 that Ohio State gets every year. The Emeka Mbuka. That's the kind of guy that I think he is. He may be a number 1 here, at least until you get that, Jeremiah Smith, but he's a very high level number 2 receiver at Ohio State. That's the kind of receiver I see him as, and a guy that maybe not quite this player as Mbuka, but can do those types of things, and could excel in the slot because, as you mentioned, great hands, great body control, great ability to get open, very polished type of player, and so that's why I think it's very important to land this guy. This is going to be a very, very important person and piece in this and cog in this recruiting class. Very, very important. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I do think that. I don't know if he's an Egbuka, because I think Egbuka, when I look at him, he's a different level. So I know that Greg got excited about thinking like he'd be a 1st round pick. I don't know if he's going to be at that quite level, because I don't know if I see the ceiling there. But to me, I do understand what you're saying, though, as like that kind of like number 2 guy that is like always going to kind of be dependable. I do think, he can be that guy. And also think like there's just so many guys. When if I was going to say someone, and now people will take this out of context, but like, I think Ohio State, and I think of Michael Thomas, right? Who Michael Thomas didn't run the fastest 40, didn't do this, didn't do that, whatever. But you're like, this guy's always open, and he always caught the football. He always did this little things right. And so he really should be a number 2, but he can be a number 1. That's what I kind of think the ceiling of like a Finley could be. I don't know if he's going to be that exact guy, but I'm just saying that type of player where, you wouldn't think he's not going to blow you away with every single trait. Isn't going to be exactly. It's not going to match up with Cam Williams, right? It's not going to match up with Cam Williams. Like, he's not going to look as physically impressive, be as fast in 100 meters or 40 or whatever, but he just might be a better receiver, and that's, I think, one of the things that, would separate him.
Me personally, I think he's a better athlete than Greathouse. I just do. I think he's a little bit more explosive and has the ability to kind of get a little bit. Although I will say, I think Greathouse has improved, and we saw at the end of the year, you like the physical attributes starting to get better and better, and I think that's what the training of what we're seeing, and they're bringing out the very best in him. But I really think that he has that kind of, could even be a better, more athletic, more explosive Greathouse. And if that's the case, man, we'll sign that guy up every time. So I think it's really important that they land him. All right. Braden Robinson, what do you think he brings to the table?
I mean, he's an explosive guy, right? Like he's like a jitterbug type of guy, escaping small areas. Obviously, he's a guy who can fly. He's small, and that's like the one thing that I think you look at, and that's always going to be something that, scares some people, because you think of like a guy, a George West, and you think of how, well, George West, part of the reason why the George West never became more than he became at Notre Dame was because he was just too small, right? But then you see guys like Tutu Atwell at, Louisville, and you see that guy's as small as it comes, and he's playing in the league right now still. And he was a dangerous, dangerous player. And that's kind of like the ceiling for a guy like Robinson. You see, obviously, look how just, slippery out after the catch. obviously the guy can really, really run. To me, I look at it and I don't know if you absolutely need him because you already have a Bubba Frazier in the class, and to me, they're kind of very similar in a lot of ways. But also, too, it doesn't hurt to have two of those guys who can really fly like that, right? And I think Notre Dame doesn't have enough of those guys, really, right? So I think that's why absolutely why you still want him, and you still want him, and you still take him in the class because he's another guy too. You saw some of like the stuff with his returning. He can do a lot of these things where he can take like the screen here and turn it into something like, that should be, like an 8-yard gain. He turns it into like a 20-yard gain, right? Like all those kind of things, just because he has that extra gear. Right. So, I really like him. I think, like I said, what the part with Frazier, it is kind of looking at where you're looking at someone like, okay, is it redundant to take two of these guys in class? Well, maybe if you had another one of those guys on the roster, but I don't think they have them. So I think it would be a really, really good pickup to have him and Frazier in the class. I think they kind of need that dynamic
ability.
Dynamic ability. There you go, Mike. You go. Right. I was trying to smooth it out there. There you go. That's why this is the Godfather right here. Just help.
Yeah, right. No, I think the other thing too is you don't know whether Bubba Frazier is going to like it in Notre Dame. You don't know whether Braden Robinson is going to like it in Notre Dame. So if you have one that likes it, then you have the player. If the other guy doesn't leave, you don't know which guy is going to stay healthy. One guy might get injured and have a career-ending injury. So
Braylon James,
that's why you take
right?
That's why you take these dudes. And I'll say this, and George West, I know personally really well, and if George, if you're listening, I apologize, but Braden Robinson's just a better athlete. He's faster, definitely much faster and more explosive. And we saw that one catch in the film that Greg showed where he basically got turned completely around and came down with the ball. One of the most miraculous catches you've ever seen somebody 5'8" make, so a talented dude. The guy can be a really good player. And look, if you can make a nice gadget player out of him and do some things, he's not as big or as physical as like a Percy Harvin, and probably not even as big as a Peter Warwick, but that's the type of thing that he could be as a gadget player. And I tell you, I've watched a lot of 40 runs. Percy Harvin, fastest dude I ever seen, actually run the 40. And I wouldn't say that this guy is quite as fast. I don't know. I don't know what his 40 times are, but he is very, very explosive. And that's
it translates to the field, right?
It really does. And he's a very, very explosive player. But I never forget being down there at the Army All-American Combine and watching Percy Harvin run and just going, I've never seen a dude that fast. I've never seen a dude, and I saw Ted Ginn, I saw all these other dudes that are extremely fast. And Percy Harvin was so darn explosive. Also one of the cockiest kids I've ever been around. But you know what? He backed it up. So
he backed it up. Yeah.
He definitely backed it up.
Yeah.
All right. So when I also look at the situation, those are the most likely at this point, Jamie, but Brody Keefe is still kind of out there, I guess. And if Notre Dame turns their attention to him, he could be a guy. But at some point, if I'm Brody Keefe, I'm like, well, how interested are these guys really in me? And then Brian Williams Jr., who is Noah Grubb's teammate, who I thought would come up here and go, wow, this is great. But then he got some pretty big offers after he left Notre Dame, or right before he left, or right before he went to Notre Dame. He picked up some great offers before and after. And I wouldn't say Notre Dame's in the driver's seat here, but I like the kid. I think he's a good player, and he's exactly what they need. Big, tall kid. He's going to get bigger and thicker. He's already, at least 6'3". They list him at 6'4", but I'd say he's at least 6'3", and, 200 pounds. And I think he could be somebody who can carry 215 easily on that frame. And I think he has sneaky ability to get vertical. I mean, he and it's not like Grubbs plays on the worst competition. They play some pretty good talent down there. So this kid gets vertical quite a bit, and he's good with the ball in the air too. And I think he needs to be a little bit more consistent. I think he's kind of raw as a player, but you can see the natural ability there. And I don't know where they actually stand with the kid, but I wouldn't say, based off of things that I've heard in his responses, that he was absolutely blown away by Notre Dame like some of these others. And so I don't know, but I like the kid. I think he's pretty explosive. He's a certainly more kind of explosive guy than who was the kid who just left from Georgia that didn't play much?
Colsey.
Yeah, certainly more explosive than a Colsey type player. But I don't know. What do you think on this kid?
I really like him. I thought he was super underrated when they offered him. I think that to me, he is a much better prospect than Brody Keefe. Like I totally understand them kind of cooling on Keefe. Actually,
yeah,
I was never like a huge Keefe fan in terms of like, I don't think like, could he play at Notre Dame? Sure. But I think it's more of a long shot that he ever becomes like a huge impact player. Brian Williams, he measured in at like a legit 6'4" this spring, 31.4 vert, 9.7 broad jump. Like, he's got some explosive traits. And I think too, like you watch him and you saw him like on the first clip too, like he's a guy who's a long strider who just like eats up he eats up ground, right? Like, so he's not like the quickest guy out of his stance or anything like that, but he does have that vertical speed. And I really think like if you probably said like his 10's probably not that great, but if you're going to put him down, like, his like flying 20 or whatever that they track like that, I bet that's pretty good. And he's got some wiggle too. He's not just like a guy who's stiff, because I think that was probably the biggest thing with Colsey, was that he was just too tight hipped. And I think he has a chance when you look at, and when you say that Williams, he is someone that in terms of rawness, yes, but in terms of, ability to get better and become a better route runner, I see that with him. I see the kind of loose hips. I see some of that burst out of his break. So, I think he does have like a high ceiling. So to me, if they were, we'll see what happens with him. But to me, I would be thrilled if they landed a guy like that at Boundary. To me, he's a kind of the perfect type of guy, because it's one thing just to get a big guy like a Colsey or a Micah Jones or whatever, but those guys are limited in what they can do, where you can see he's not just going to be a guy you could just throw it up to and win back shoulder. He can do more than that.
Yeah. I do think, Jamie, that you're going to have to come up with a couple more names, don't you? The nice thing here is if you can lock down Finley and Robinson and you got 4, then you can wait and see what happens the senior season, right? And just you go out, you find guys, and you say, look, we really like you. We just want to see your senior season. Can you come check us out over the summer here? And we're taking one more wide receiver. We think it's going to be you. Can you come check us out? Maybe that's the plan if Brian Williams isn't the guy. But I do think you need a big body guy. I really do. And otherwise, you're definitely going to be in the portal. You're definitely going to be in the portal. And I think, Micah Gilbert, it kind of hurts, unfortunately, that he got sidelined this spring, because he could have learned a tremendous amount, because there just was no, Malachi Fields was not on campus. So there was no real, boundary guys out there. And so a guy like Jerome Bettis Jr. got the fast track, as far as, but a lot of those reps should have been for Micah Gilbert. And unfortunately that didn't happen. So, so not only are you down in numbers, but I think, how far advanced are some of these guys at this point? And, I think Micah Gilbert showed out that in early fall last year that, oh, this guy's got something. And so we hope to see him progress. But I think we were hoping to see that this spring, and that just didn't happen because he was limited or just flat out, I should say, and it was probably, I wouldn't say he was probably there for the first 5 practices, maybe 6, maybe
something like that.
Yeah, it wasn't very many, and we know how the first couple go, where you're in shorts and not really doing anything, So a lot of the meat and potatoes of what you're trying to learn happens in practice 3 to 12 or 13. That's where the real reps are. And so I don't know. I think it's important that they find somebody besides Brian Williams Jr. And I got to figure that that's what we'll see with Mike Brown and where he's going. Tight end recruiting is going to be interesting here, Jamie. I think it's obvious Notre Dame's in a good spot right now with Evan Jacobson. I think that that's the most likely guy. I've done some digging myself on some of these other guys and where Notre Dame stands. I don't think Notre Dame's going to be in the Isaac Jensen race much. And I'm not sure that I'm not saying that the kid himself was necessarily not interested in Notre Dame. I'm just not sure that he's exactly what they're looking for. It sounds like it's probably Notre Dame or Michigan for Matt Ludwig. And it sounds like either Notre Dame or one of the state schools for Ian Premer. I think if Ian Premer goes outside of the state schools, it's probably going to be Notre Dame. But I do think that he likes the in-state schools quite a bit, likes being from home, likes being around home, that type of thing. So it's going to be tough for Notre Dame to pull him. But I think first of all, if Ludwig is willing to go to Michigan or Notre Dame should have a shot. But let's be honest, Michigan's put some good players in the NFL as well. And so they just had a first round draft pick as well. So I don't know. Tight end here, how are you feeling? Because they need 3. And I would say right now, the way it's looking is, Jacobson, Ludwig, and Premer are really the only 3, and they need 2 to land out of there. So Jacobson, I feel like they'll get. I think Notre Dame's clearly the leader. I think they'll get him. So you got to go 1 or 2. One of 2 in Premer and Ludwig, and I think Notre Dame's right there. But are they the leader for either one of those guys? That's the question. But your thoughts on them as players?
Yeah, I think that is the question. I'd like having, if they land Jacobson as one of the guys, because I think he's the inline guy, right?
Sure.
I think he's an inline guy. I really think he's got high potential as a blocker. I like him in that sense. I do think that he's got, definitely some ability as a receiver. He's not a dynamic guy in terms of like just his movement. And I would say he reminds me a little bit of Cole Kmet in some ways, but not quite as smooth of an athlete.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's probably like the difference though. But just in terms of like size and catch radius and all that, yeah, like I see a lot of that. But man, I love both of the guys. I wasn't a big Gavin Mueller guy, so I don't think like to me, he isn't close to the same level as Ludwig or Premer. And Ludwig is, I think, just an absolute stud. And I know he's from like, Montana. He's not from like a big area, but he's a multi-sport athlete, basketball, wrestling, track, 11.2 300 meters, elite shot put results, and like throwing like, through the discus 156 feet. Like I watch him, and if you just watch him and just forget about like, obviously the competition is not good, but you obviously see that he's had testing and track things that identify this guy's an elite athlete. And you watch him after the catch, and to me, I see a guy like Brock Bowers. Like that is that kind of that ability.
Wow.
And that's honestly what I really see. I honestly see that.
And I see a better version of Michael Mayer is what I see.
Because I think he's a much better athlete than Michael Mayer. And Michael Mayer he's just faster than Michael Mayer.
I do think he is faster, and his hips are smoother. I agree.
And then I would say too, like, so I think that's like the potential. Obviously, it's going to be a jump and an adjustment for him to go against better guys. The way he dominates, in high school isn't going to be the way that he dominates, and because he's so much better than any of the kids that he faces. But it is going to be a thing where, he has that ability, in him. To me, that's honestly what I think. That's to me, he's a top 100 level kid. To me, and could be like end up being a top 50 easy. And then with Bremer, man, I really like Bremer too. I think he is probably the most the highest floor, like, but also just a sky high ceiling out of the, like, as a receiver, right? Because you just see he's just got great, just natural ability as a receiver, just the absolute fits the kind of athlete you want at the position, with his hands, with his suddenness out of his routes. You know, he's really a big receiver now, so he's going to have to kind of like develop a lot of other parts of his game to be a tight end. But you think of how often like Notre Dame and other teams play the tight end in the slot, and he's an ideal guy there, right? And he's an elite basketball player too, like a big time basketball player for like a guy who, like, he could legitimately play college basketball, right? And there's just not a lot of guys like that. And
Yeah.
I just think too, like him or Luke, I think those are the guys that I think if you land one of those two, man, you're cooking with gas. But like you said, they're probably like, you know, they're up there, but they really have to kind of win it here in the next couple months with like the official and what they do leading up to it, really. Because you would say if things ended today, would they land either of them? Probably not, right? So they're not choosing today, so that doesn't matter, but it could matter quite a bit. So that's why I think like they're going to be in tough. In saying that, if you look at the NFL draft in recent years, Mike, look how many of these guys were like these tight ends that end up being like second round picks that end up being just studs in the NFL.
Yeah.
Are not Michael Mayer, not 5-star guys. And not that you would want Michael Mayer. Obviously, you'd want Michael Mayer, but there's just a lot of guys who are really good athletes that it is a totally undervalued position in terms of rankings of where you see guys. And it's all about projection and development. And it's guys who have like natural receiving ability, just they're great athletes at that size. It's can they put on the weight and stay great athletes? And so it would be great if they land one of those two. I do think they'll be able to land somebody who's a pretty darn good player. If you think about it, Tommy Tremble was like one of those guys who was like not seen as that high guy. Then you're like, man, he ended up being way better than I can't remember who the other 2018 tight end was off the top of my head, but he was the second tight end and being better. Mitchell Evans, another guy, was the second tight end, ended up being better than Kane Barong, right? Like there's a lot of that, right? So I think you can find somebody there. It's not to find a second tight end in the class would be there, but obviously the ideal is to land one of those two because I think both those guys are just absolute studs.
Yeah. I like both of them too. You know, with Bremer, I see Eifert receiving ability, you know, and ability to stretch, maybe not quite as fast, but bigger. He's going to be bigger than Eifert for sure.
Yeah.
And I see a much more athletic, explosive Kyle Rudolph because I think he may not get as big as Kyle Rudolph, but I think he's going to have that kind of size. This guy's going to be 260. I really think he's going to hit that weight, and that's pretty good. Or, well, you know, and Eli Raridan, I think, is another type of player that he could be, you know, if Eli maximizes where we think he can go too. So, you know, I think that they're kind of similar, those types of players. So you landed Jacobson, you land one of those two and you're in good shape. But again, you gotta get them and we'll see what happens. All right, we're going to get to some questions from IRCD customers. Again, there's a ton here, so we'll have to see how many we can get to. We'll try to get to as many as we can. General sports media question, why do teams allow you to watch practices when they don't necessarily have to? I think part of it is they like the coverage that we bring. You know, it gives their program exposure and and they like to work with the media and make sure that there's a good, healthy working relationship there. They understand we're here to do a job, and I think, look, if I were those guys, I would look at it as, and this has been the case many times where we've been at practice and they say, hey, don't report on this, right? We're going to show this, don't report on it. They've asked us to do that countless times, and nobody does. And that's a built of trust and that type of thing. And so I think it's important to have a good working relationship with the media. And I think Notre Dame has a really good working relationship with the media, as is. And so, would I love to have more? Sure, I would love to have more, but it just is what it is. All right. Let's see. Based on what we know about the team post-spring, what style of offense and defense do you think would give this team the most trouble, and why? Do any of the opponents on the 2025 schedule fit that style of play? Shire 05, I think that's one of the best questions we've had in a long time. What do you think there, Yama?
You know what? I think if it would be a lot easier question last year, because you would have said exactly like playing Texas A&M in the opener, why that would have given them trouble, because they had like such a young offensive line. You're going to go in there on the road against Texas A&M, which had 3 guys that you knew were going to be high picks in the NFL draft. And hey, guess what? They were high picks in the NFL draft, right? So I think there's a lot of kind of matchups there that I think you would say, man, that would give them the hardest time, last year. And this year, I don't know like what you would say in terms of offensively, what's going to give them the hardest time. I mean, because you could just say, I mean, it could just be as simple, but I think this is for anyone to say, like, well, the teams with the best pass rush, right? Like that's going to give them the hardest time. But or a team that could stop the run with less bodies. But I don't know if there's a team on the schedule that I think that on paper, at least, is a team that is going to be able to stop the run with less bodies. I don't think there is, to be honest.
I don't either.
So that's the you would have said maybe like an A&M maybe last year, but that they're replacing a lot of guys up front. So I think in a lot of ways, Notre Dame's strength, what you think is going to be like running the football. I don't know if like Miami, I think they fixed all these, went heavy to fix all their secondary. I don't know if they're going to be that good at stopping the run, because they were bad at it last year, and I'm not sure how much better they're going to be. So that's the kind of thing that can ultimately be the difference in the game. And then I think defensively, that's one of the things too, that if you're looking at it, I would say if you were going to say what was going to be the hardest thing, it would be teams that really like could play heavy, right? Could play heavy and be like, okay, we're going to do this against, Notre Dame, because they don't quite have, even though I think they're definitely bigger at defensive tackle and not going to be, I would say, better, but deeper, right, at defensive tackle than they were. But still, if teams are going to come out and be like 12 and 13 personnel, whatever, but who are the teams on the schedule that are really like that? Arkansas, maybe, but they don't really play that kind of style that much. Like I don't really kind of see it. You could say any kind of the ones with the quarterback, because they have Taylor Green's like a very mobile quarterback, and he can do a lot of things, but he also, takes a lot of bad sacks and things like that too. So I don't know, like I don't know if they play a team this year that really like matches up in a way that you're like, man, this is going to be a bad matchup. And even if you said like last year, Mike, we just talked about, you would have said Texas A&M, that's a bad matchup for them. Well, they won the game, and they ran it on them on the final drive to seal the game. And you would have said, well, Georgia and their offense and what they can do, and then look at all these guys that Notre Dame's going to tried to run on Notre Dame, and Notre Dame smacked them right back in the mouth. So I don't know if I don't think there is a team that really has like, man, that is going to be the worst matchup for Notre Dame.
Yeah. I think, I hate to say it, but I think the two teams that could give Notre Dame trouble next year are two teams they played last year, and that's Penn State and Ohio State. Because Ohio State's going to be able to trot 3, 4 guys out there at wide receiver, and that makes it difficult. And as good as Leonard Moore and Gray are, it's still difficult to shut down 3, 4 really good receivers, especially if you don't get the pass rush. But I think Notre Dame will have a much better pass rush this year than they had in that Ohio State game. And I think if they had that pass rush, they would have also affected Howard a lot more than they did. Also, Notre Dame had to play a lot of man in that situation, and I think that Chris Ash looked at that and saw how Notre Dame got gouged by Howard and said, you know what, we're going to have to start playing some more zone because teams are going to start. You can't play this much man if you got a quarterback who can run, because that guy's just going to be, if everybody's turned around running, following a receiver, they're not looking back at what the quarterback is doing. So I think that those two teams, Penn State, I think will be able to run the ball. They just will. They're going to be a good rushing team next year or this coming year. But I think Notre Dame will be able to handle that. And I don't think that Penn State has the passing game that Ohio State does. So, but I think those two teams are going to be two of the better teams in college football. And hopefully Notre Dame can beat them. I think that they will be better. I think they'll have a better opportunity this year, because I think that some of the problems they had last year, well, I say that if they are healthy, let's just put it that way, because they could be in the same exact situation they were last year at that time, where health was more the problem than anything. All right. What level of apprehension do you believe the staff has in relying too heavily on during his situation last year? I mean, I think they have bodies there, and I think Anye, I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be fine. I don't think it's a big deal. I think the bigger question is, how great does Anye want to be? And I think that is the big question heading into this season, because it's kind of now or never for him, and he has the potential. And if Anye wants to be a great player, this could be a lot of fun. This could be a very fun season, because he has that kind of potential. And I think we saw that last year, Jamie, when he was able to play, he was really starting to become that player. Your thoughts there?
Yeah, he absolutely was. And I think he looked really good this spring, but I wouldn't say that they're going to look at it as they're going to like over rely on him at all. Like, I just think that if there's any kind of signs of, or if he has to leave the team or whatever, like, I think that one of the reasons they went out and got like Jared Dawson in the portal is because of that kind of thing. Right.
Yeah,
and
sure.
Obviously Jared Dawson looked great in the spring. And I think they're pretty deep at defensive tackle in terms of number of guys who can play in the rotation. Do they have anyone who really is going to maybe has the ceiling of Anye? Probably not. But you know what? Anye has to reach that ceiling. So that we haven't even seen that yet. So he's got to be that guy. So that's to be determined. But I gotta say, like, the fact that he was even back and that there were no restrictions that he came out of in the spring, that's not something we expected, Mike. So I'm encouraged by that.
All right. What do each of you identify as the biggest area improvement for Marcus Freeman since he took over as head coach? I'd like to analyze two areas: one in terms of recruiting, and two in terms of leading the program at large. I'll start. Recruiting, I think the biggest thing that he's done there is he took it. One, I think he kind of modernized it and took it from. I think Notre Dame needed a little more juice when they were having recruiting come in, recruits coming in. They needed more of a celebratory, not all business, let's have some fun. I think that has helped. But the other thing too is it's not all about one person anymore, right? It's now all about a bunch of people working together. And I think Chad Bowden did Marcus Freeman a favor by leaving, because I think that type of situation is not a sustainable situation. I think you need a bunch of people working together and doing a good job, and I think that that's really important. And Marcus has really put together what I feel is the perfect recruiting team, in that you've got a great evaluator, you've got kind of the hype guy. You've got Carter, who does a really good job of managing all these different types of things, and you've got Myron now, who can relate to players and tell his story, and that's just a whole lot better than what they had before. And I think you're seeing the results of that right now, and that's encouraging. As far as Marcus Freeman, the head coach, I think it was important for Marcus Freeman to figure out who he is as a head coach, and that was probably one of my only criticisms with Marcus Freeman. And I understood why he had to do that, in that, he was probably too passive at times and just not aggressive, but you also don't want to come off as, this crazy idiot out on the sidelines. You got to kind of grow into your role and figure out. And a lot of times I think guys come out and they feel like, I got to be this big angry guy and blah, blah, blah. And that's not really who you are. But I think you're starting to see the real Marcus Freeman come out. It's important to work the referees. He's been doing that. It's important to be animated, I think, at times on the sideline, because you have to convey a sense of urgency. There's only so many minutes and so many plays in a game. And so to stand there stoic, as sometimes some other coaches have done in the past, or Marcus was probably a little reluctant to do at the beginning, of getting a little bit more animated, I think that doesn't show the level of importance of fixing things now. And I think that those are two of the biggest things. And then the third would be, I think he's learned how to handle success now, and how to handle bad parts of the season too. And it's easy to, I shouldn't say it's easy to handle success, but it's easier to coach when you're having success. In that everybody's excited about things. It's much harder to pick people up when things are bad. And I think after that Northern Illinois thing, a bunch of people are like, this guy's in over his head, he should be fired, blah, blah, blah. He did a tremendous job of handling that. And the one thing I'll say about him more than anything is, I think he really won over his team when he went in after that NIL or NIU loss and said, look, you guys are looking for where to shoot your arrows. It's me. You shoot me. I screwed this up, and it's all on me. We didn't play well, but it's my job, and I screwed this up. And I think that meant a tremendous amount to his team and showed he's a true leader. And I just couldn't have been more impressed with the way he's handled things. So your thoughts, Jamie?
Yeah, I think as a head coach, you can just see how he's grown into the job and really kind of learned, and like you said, kind of became his own person as a head coach, where I think early on, which is understandable, you come in and, he's asking questions, to Jim Tressel, and he's asking questions and he's trying to learn, and you want to take the advice, but you got to be you. And you got to be exactly who you are. And you also got to know that, like, when Jim Tressel coached, that was decades ago. Like, it's a different game now. And where maybe like being safe and doing certain things was the right way to approach it before. But it's not the right way to approach it now, because there's so many people advancements with, whether it's like analytics and just being aggressive in these spots, because it tells you that your chances to win the game are better here. And think of how many things where Notre Dame, they won like extra possessions or got extra points because of being aggressive at the end of the half, or, going for it on fourth down, or doing some of these things. And it wasn't like he didn't go for it on fourth down every time, but it was the timing of all of these kind of things. And I just think he just became more comfortable with it, and kind of saying like, even if you say, even before the NIU game, like you look at that spot in Texas A&M, they went for it on that one fourth down. They got stopped. That didn't change his mentality the whole year. For maybe Marcus Freeman in year one, that would have changed, and he would have like, well, we can't go for it. We got to punt here. And he wasn't like that the whole year. He stayed, aggressive. And I think that was a big, big thing. And then I think too, like, I totally agree with the recruiting. I think there's more like unity within like just the staff and everything, the whole program together now with that. And I do think that is something that, I think there was a lot of things that, as Matt has written too, that Chad Bowden came in, did, and was like necessary in a lot of ways in terms of like his aggressiveness too, in that way. But also there were some things that I don't think like he was doing it, on his own and for himself and not exactly fitting in with exactly everyone else. And it's got to be collaborative. And I think when it's collaborative and you have good, smart people all working together,
Yes.
you can take advantage of the success you had on the field and do it. And that's, I think, what you're seeing right now.
Just even in my own personal experience, just, hiring people and being around people, when you have one guy who's kind of, and I'm not saying this about Bowden per se, it's just it's so important to have harmony amongst the staff and everybody knowing the situation and knowing their role and that type of thing. And I just think it's the smartest thing Marcus Freeman did, is when Chad decided he wanted to go, okay, fine. Because I think he realized I got to fix this. This is my opportunity to kind of address what really needs to be addressed. I think he did it in a tremendous way. And we're already seeing the benefits of that. And I think it's going to continue to get better and better, especially if they continue to win, which I think we'll see that moving forward. And I think you mentioned one thing about the coaching part that I think a lot of coaches don't get, and this goes back to your fourth down part of things, is consistent message, right? Marcus Freeman has said, we're going to be an aggressive team, and we're going to be an O-line, D-line team, and it's a consistent message, and that's what they focus on. And when it's consistent like that, people know what's expected of them. And there's not a lot of change of this and that and this and that. And I think that allows you to be successful. Good question there, Irish Bronx. Jay Patelli has a good question here. What's your dream realistic finish in recruiting for the 2026 class? And who's the most underrated recruit in your opinion? All right, for me, I'm going to go quickly through this. We don't have a lot of time. Running back, I'd say Bonner. Wide receiver, right now it'd be Finley, Robinson, and Brian Williams. Tight end, I'd prefer to have Ludwig and Bremer. I think Jacobson is a good inline blocker, and that would help. But I think it's probably more realistic. Jacobson and maybe Ludwig, maybe Bremer. For O-line, to me, Ekene Abako, I think, is an important recruit, but I also really like Grayson McKeel. I'll be thrilled with either one of those guys, but Ekene Abako, I think, is important. For defensive line, Notre Dame, I feel, is going to get Tiki Hola. Will they get Noah Clark? I don't know. But, man, I'd have a hard time letting Alistair Vallejo go if they can get him on campus. I love that kid. I think he's going to be a really talented player. And, I liked Tavian Branch, too. I like him. I think he's a good player. I like him. And, even Schwerzel's a guy that Notre Dame would take in a heartbeat in any other class. For me, I think Golden and Dre Quinn would be ideal. I would love those two. As far as linebacker goes, of course, Ely would be the guy, but Tank King, is probably more likely, but certainly. As far as corner goes, certainly Joey O'Brien, but then I would love to add, because I think they'll get Reddish. I think Pouncey and Reddish is a good combination at safety. I'd love to add a third corner. So one of Kari Adams, Jordan Thomas, I'd be thrilled with either one of them. I think they're both really, really good players. I'd say probably I would say Kari Adams, and the only reason I'd say that is I'd like for Notre Dame to get more kids from Maryland and have it be successful. There's a lot of good players there. That would be my dream class. As far as the most underrated player, are you talking commits right now? Because if it's commits, it's probably different than if they're guys who aren't commit. But Man, most underrated right now. I'd probably say Sullivan Garvin. I would think would be the most underrated because I think everybody else is roughly rated where they could be. I do think that there's some guys who are probably a little bit better than their rankings, their national rankings. But I'd say Sullivan Garvin. Your thoughts here on your, ideal close and then most underrated?
I mean, Sullivan Garvin definitely is the most underrated commit for me. I think he's got a sky high ceiling, and he's a really, really good athlete for a guy that big. For to be basically 320 pounds and move like he does, that's rare, right? So, I mean, I don't really have much to add in terms of your dream class because most of my feelings are the exact same way. I will say that I would throw. I don't know if they would have a shot, but if we're just talking dream class, I really like the Sincere Johnson too. I do think because he's a guy who can, rush off the edge, and play off the ball too. So I really, really like him, as well. And I would throw in.
You like him better than Ely though?
No, I don't. I would prefer Ely, but I think if you it's like one of those things. If you could get one of those guys, I think would be awesome. Just because Ely's bigger, right? So, but I think, and then I will also throw in that I'm a big fan of Mason James. I think Mason James is a really, really good receiver. And to me, he might not be. I think of him more as he's a field receiver. I see a lot of Will Fuller type qualities in him. So
I would say he can run more routes than Fuller, though, wouldn't you? I mean, I think he can do more things than what Fuller can do. Yeah.
Yes.
But I good comparison. I agree.
Yeah.
I just don't know whether they're going to have any shot at him. It seems like the whole thing has just kind of died since then. But all right. Why has Indy not done more to address the wide receiver position? It's the weakest position consecutive years, blah, blah, blah. Look, I get it, but it's kind of like you have to develop one. I think Mike Mickens is a really good cornerbacks coach and has proven that. But the first couple of years, it wasn't like people were just running to come here. That was not the case. So he had to show that he could do that at Notre Dame and has shown that. And now all of a sudden, lots of corners are starting to show up and be very interested in Notre Dame, and rightfully so. I mean, if I were a corner, there'd be no other place I would go but Notre Dame, just based off everything I know. So that's really what it boils down to. And the fact that Notre Dame doesn't have an elite quarterback. They just haven't produced an elite quarterback and somebody who goes in the NFL. And right now, I wouldn't say that they have on their roster, besides CJ Carr, anybody who you'd say, looks like a 5-star quarterback at this point. Now, does any of those guys, could they be that? Could they develop into that? Sure. But those two things, I think, have the most problem. And that's what I think will be the thing that, we'll see. Next question. Do you feel you're getting more accurate info where we stand with recruits now compared to info you were previously received under the Bowden regime? Well, I think that's obvious. I think the answer to that would be yes. Is this the kind of recruiting class that takes ND over the hump, especially combined with the previous two classes? Depends on how it closes. If most of those guys in the dream class that we just talked about come, I think it's a heck of a step in the right direction. Don't you, Jamie?
Yeah, I think it is a heck of a step in the right direction, but I don't think it's if we're looking at something to get over the hump. I think the whole point of it is you got to keep stacking those classes again and again, right? Yeah. I don't think you can go and then have okay, well, then you took a big drop the next class. It's no, you got to have there's a level of consistency there.
But that's what he's bringing, I think,
Yeah. Oh, for sure. But I think that's
last year's class, thing. I wouldn't say is elite at this point, but we've seen so far that the guys who've showed up are probably, what we were hoping ceiling wise. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So far, that's good. And maybe their ceiling's even a little bit better than what we thought. We don't know, but just the early returns are good. And so if you take the class the previous year plus last year's class and this year's class, which I think, is going to be the best out of the three, if they land the guys that we think they can land, then you're trending in the right direction. And that's very, very exciting. Sorry to interrupt, Jamie. Go ahead.
No, I think that's a great point. And I think even if you look at, say, like the 2024 class, and obviously there's so many guys that have played and like you feel like really, really good about, but there's a bunch of guys that haven't played yet that are, you would say, are like the lower rated guys, just like from their composite rankings, guys like Carson Hobbs, Bodie Cahoon, Cole Mullins, Sean Seviano. Those guys look like they can play. How good they're going to be, hey, we'll see. But like when you are getting guys like that you see like big jumps in their development and where they can, and you're like, oh, this is why they took those guys, and this is why these guys can be that. And obviously you saw like Anthony Knapp wasn't a big time guy, but hey, man, the guy's good. He started as a true freshman, and he's going to like start for 4 years or whatever. Like, when you're doing that, it kind of shows that you're doing a pretty darn good job of evaluating and developing these kids. So I think that's the thing that people should kind of realize too, is that you can always kind of like re-rank it after and look at it and be like, well, I mean, maybe people weren't as hyped on signing day, but they're a lot more hyped about it now.
Yeah. All right, last question here. This team looks like it's very deep at most positions, but who is the one player that they could at least afford to lose to a long-term injury? That's a good question. Man. I
mean, I would probably say Jaden Greathouse.
Yeah.
Just given receiver, even though I think like, hey, they have other guys who can play the slot or whatever, right? But I think if you're looking at what Jaden Greathouse was in the final 2 games last season, the kind of spring that he had, that you think that, hey,
you went mute on me, Jamie.
Sorry, that
must be plugged. That's okay.
He was, Jaden Greathouse was a guy who took, huge step at the end of last year, and then continue to take that step this spring. And then you're kind of counting on him to be that guy this year for them. And if he's not, like, if he's not available and there isn't someone there, even though they could have somebody come in and play the slot, like they could move Faze onto the slot and he could be pretty good. Or they could, they got Will Pauling there. Like they'd be fine technically, but like there's a difference between having a guy that like, oh, hey, this is a big game, he can like take over this game, and not having that guy. So that's why I think like their passing game, if you're looking at any kind of thing that like, hey, when we're talking about getting over the hump and like winning a championship, the passing game is a big part of that. So I think that's why I would kind of list them. I wouldn't even put him as like the best guy in the team. You'd say Jeremiah Love is the best guy in the team.
Yeah.
Leonard Moore is the best guy on the team. But like, just in terms of value and what he means and compared to whatever with everything else in the position, I would say Greathouse.
I'd say that's a good pick. I was going to say Eli Raritan because we just don't know what's going to happen with some of these other guys. I think he would be one that would be. I hate to say it, but I'd say Wagner would probably be a big loss too. And they have guys they could slide in there, and I'm sure he'd do fine. But he was just kind of the Mr. Consistency last year, and we're not sure what's going to happen at the left side. Is it going to be Knapp? That type of thing. We don't know, but I think Wagner would be a tough loss, and I think Leonard Moore would be a tough loss. Even though I really like Carson Hobbs, I really do. I think he's going to be a pretty good player. It's just we don't know if he can do what Moore can do. I mean, you just can't. So I'd say those are probably the guys that stand out the most to me, and of course there's lots of other great players, but like even a Jared Dawson, we don't know how great he's going to be, but watching him in the spring game and his ability to play the run, which I think is a weakness for Notre Dame. I think if they lost him, that would really kind of hurt a little bit because I do think Gabe Rubio is a pretty good player and pretty solid against the run, but you need somebody else to spell him, and I'm not sure they have somebody like that right now. And So Dawson, I think, is another key cog in this right now, and why they had to go get him in the portal. So, all right, folks, that's going to be it for the show. Thanks for everything, and wanted to mention again, go to the front page of Irish Sports Daily. Click on the premium section. Lots going on with recruiting. We'll continue next week talking more about the recruiting and what's left, and as we get ready to head into these official visits, and so looking forward to it. Thanks for listening. We will talk to you next week on Power Hour.